Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to talk about technology and how to use data to manage your projects. Michael Pink is going to bring us how to do that. All of you look like cats chasing a laser pointer, trying to figure out what data to use to make your projects go smarter. Michael's about to show you how to do that. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today, Anthony.
We talk about data as the key to managing projects. Where are we messing up, Michael?
Well, there's a lot of areas of where we mess it up, but I think the number one misunderstanding is how do we capture good data that will help us be a better business, not just run a better project. But you need to do both, and you need to understand what data is useful, what data is broken, how to fix all those issues, and do it in a streamlined manner. And that's, it can be overwhelming, but I want to simplify that.
People, I can't tell you how many times I sit in meetings where we're going to collect data, we're going to do this, we're going to track and manage. The problem is if the company's not run that way from the beginning, going back in and implementing that later on, it's like pulling teeth, right? To change an organization that's been lazy about data management and functionality with their data, going back later on, I've done it myself, right? Going back in and challenging the ways of being, and now going and, hey guys, we need to track and manage what we're doing on a daily basis so we can see where we're going to do better. Those practices have to be built into the day-to-day activities. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit. I know when you and I talk, we talk a lot about schedule management is the key to a successful project. Where does that start, Michael?
It actually starts in operations. Schedule management has to be dictated by a bunch of controls around the scheduling management process. Generally speaking, that's, 95% of companies don't have the level of controls built into their business to truly have a standard operating procedure around best practices in schedule management, nor do they have visibility into how are the teams actually building, managing the schedules. And that, to me, is probably the biggest problem in construction.
So where do you start with that schedule? Does it start when you're estimating the project? Are you putting together schedules for people to estimate to? How are you getting? So if I'm on a job site, let's just talk about a breakdown. Where do breakdowns happen, and maybe where do schedules go wrong? And if you're saying you're starting at operations, is that too late? I mean, shouldn't we be working on it at estimating?
No, what I'm talking about in operations is putting up a standard set of procedures in how do you build and manage your schedules. And it doesn't necessarily have to be pre-construction. I think that the most important piece to the equation is making sure that you're building and managing a detailed construction schedule that you believe in and that is giving you the information that you need to know in real time to make good decisions throughout the challenging world of construction. But when I say it's operations, you have to have a standard set of protocols and best practices and understanding of those best practices to deploy into your business on all of your projects. And you also need to have visibility of that to ensure accountability at the site level and to be able to communicate back and forth to make good decisions throughout time. Construction is a world of moving parts, things that don't go as planned, some things that do. If you're not having a top-notch schedule management process, following best practices, doing it frequently enough, and analyzing that data to be able to communicate and collaborate between your owner, between your executives at the site level, and your subs, and that data set is broken, and you're listening to that broken data, that is where we run into the problem that we see in construction of projects seeming like they're going great until the end of the job and then taking too long and eroding all of our profit margins, which is the number one cause of overruns and profit margin decreasing for every single construction company out there.
Of course I want to have a great schedule. I can put together these great schedules, but those darn subs, they don't show up. The electrician said he was going to be there on Tuesday and he's not there. How could he?
Well, think about the fact that if you're not leveraging the data embedded in your schedule to exercise your contractual rights with your subcontractors to put them in a situation where they know that they can't skirt by without essentially causing damage to your job that's going to result in them maybe not doing the next job or them having to lose money on this job. If you don't have that data distilled in a manner where they'll actually listen and they understand the risks that they're imposing on the job, then you might as well be just banging your head against the wall because they're not going to listen.
Well, I've been there. I've written contracts with subs that are iron tight. I've got penalties. I've got all kinds of great. I've implied a lot of great impact to the subs who don't perform, and it's still. I'm not sure that threat gets them there either way. I'm going to have a failure, right? I mean, sometimes I feel like that it's too late, right? If they go back and have to, by the way, if I have to get to contract and pull that out and go, look, let me show you right here, you've got a penalty if you don't do this, it's too late by then. I feel like by that point, I've already lost. I mean, look, I might be able to do something about it. I might be able to threaten them, but I've already lost my ability to perform to the client side. And even with having a contractual language that can mitigate some of that or give me some support on that. A lot of times I feel like we've got to get back to have we painted the picture, and do we understand the sub there? Do we understand the subs well enough, right? Does a sub understand what we mean when, how many schedules have you looked at that say we're going to mobilize, right? Day one says mobilize. What the flip does that mean? If I ask you what mobilize means, Michael, what does it mean to mobilize? Electrician mobilize.
Means show up, get going to run. But hey, listen, I think we're getting off the point here. Yes, the schedule, most people think that data is useful for managing a job, and that is absolutely the truth, but they're not understanding at a broader level how that information is gold for your business. Thinking about project managers, thinking about supers, they think that what's in their brain based on their experience on project after project after project and challenge after challenge after challenge. Why do they keep them on board? Because they've got this experience and you've built this trust for them making good decisions. And that experience is in their brain. If you look at the scheduled data on all of your projects, that's your digital performance, right? That's the only data set that's ever going to piece together for your business across all your jobs. What was the plan? What happened over time? How did they what sort of decisions were made at each iteration due to what issues were causing impacts and inefficiencies and delays? How did they respond? And how did that go? And what happened at the end of the job? And where did all our bottlenecks occur? And where did all our challenges occur? And what subcontractors drove the job, and which subcontractors would it not have mattered if they showed up? Which ones drive our business? And if just to look at that on one job and to isolate it on one job is okay for that job. But what I'm getting at is from an operational perspective, your digital experience is only in your schedule. You can't look at cost data and understand the what, the why, and the how did we get here. You can only understand that it costs too much and what happens again, and we got in another fight with the owner. But if we truly want to understand how our business ties to our profits, it's the construction projects. To truly understand how we built those projects is in the scheduled data. And the only reason the scheduled data is so important, it's the only data set that shows the plan and connects all parts and pieces through logic into one systematic whole, so that we can see when we came out of the ground, this happened. This is how we responded. This is the delay that occurred. And then to look at that at all of your projects simultaneously, bucket into the same sort of format, you will understand your business in ways that no other data set can provide. And that is why I say it's the most powerful data set. It is your digital construction experience data set that dictates how you operate and where the challenges are. And if you do that across all your projects and understand it across all the different subtypes and classify that data appropriately, you are going to be a company that is on your way towards optimization. And there's no other data set that can do that.
Well, I mean, to the point where you go, look, I notice we keep messing up when it comes to this sub or this area, or, hey, I plan on have footings and foundations down, but we realize that we never had the inspector, getting some data about where we have failures, I think lends itself to a lot of the good, hearing the story about what caused the problem is great. Now I want to know, what are we doing about it? Right here. Now the question is, how do we roll that in? How do we roll that into the, not having that ever happen again?
Well, that's where you get into pattern detection, right? So looking at it at one project and saying, oh yeah, on this project, the inspector didn't show up on this day. That's great. Or this subcontractor took too long. Great. How about if I look at 100 projects and figure out what patterns across all my projects seem to promote the most risk in my business, where we had failures, where we had overruns, what were those drivers? And those become the first layer of areas that I want to improve, right? Things aren't always out of our control. Like, say, for instance, you realize that your electricians on most of your jobs become critical at the 60 to 80% mark, right? And that seems to be the point in time where we get delayed and then we over compress and then inefficiencies start to happen and stress starts to exist and the arguing ensues. Then I would know that at that point, if that's happening on most of my jobs, then electricians are most important for me to get on top of before I even sign that contract, that it's worth the extra money to get the best electrician, that I am absolutely sitting there making sure that I'm setting expectations and I'm making sure that I understand the resource counts that they're going to need. And I know the good electricians versus the bad electricians so that my business can start to be much more productive. And then that's just one thing. Say that we've got inspection issues, right? I don't know. Is this a contractual issue that is the owner's fault or is this my fault? I don't really know. But does it cause a lot of problems between me and the owner? And do we have to look into how to get ahead of that inspection problem, right? Or say it's a material fabrication issue for transformers. What are the patterns that I see in my business that seem to have the most risk on my profits or the things that are going to delay my jobs the most? And then able to understand all that, you got to get a lay of the land of your data from the best data set out there.
I think you're right on. Getting more understanding of where I continue to get. Oftentimes I look at us and think we're kind of like fish in a fish tank, right? We kind of swim around. Oh, look, bubbles. Oh, look, bubbles. Right? We keep repeating the same mistakes over. I'm like, guys, you're fish in a fish tank, and I'm like, you got to take that data, and you've got to go. If the problem's out here that we keep noticing, we've got to get over here and solve it before the problem happens, right? It does me no good to go, hey, I'm going to mess up again. Great. Now, what are you going to do about it, right? What am I going to do to solve that? Get ahead of that inspector, get ahead of those orders, get ahead of that procurement. I spent a lot of time with doing data that you talk about, right? We go deep dive into it, right? What's our number one issue with projects? One of the things we realized was starting right. Look, it's usually not the end result that's a problem. It's the beginning. We're buying out subs and getting submittals, getting approvals. That process right there, no one's under pressure there, so they kind of chunk up and eat up some time, right? I can't tell you how many projects I work on, and all of a sudden it's the submittals. Submittals are taking forever, or even starting with getting subs signed up and contracted. Right? We went to bid with a budget number. We didn't go to bid with an actual sub. We didn't vet the sub before we went to bid. Right? All of that stuff we've moved now to the other side of the fence where we don't submit a bid unless we have real subs that have been vetted out before we even got it. So the day an owner says go, now we know that I can go. We could literally take the proposals we have that match the scopes that we gave them, that match the project and the timeline and schedule. We could contract right now. We don't have to go spend a week buying out or renegotiating. We've already done that prior to the estimate. And that was one that we didn't realize. It took a minute to figure that out, right? We had to go back and go, what was causing those first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of a project not to take a hot start, right? In other words, why weren't we playing the 2-minute drill for a project on day one, right? I mean, why do football games, why do we go to the 2-minute drill? Why aren't we playing the whole game that way?
Right. And now that you use the football analogy, it's a great one because think about game tape. Think about what happens every week before football when you're playing the next team. The coaches sit down, they look at the last 10 games that team played, and they detect patterns. They detect patterns in their defense, they detect patterns in their offense, and they put together a game plan. The data that we can use to do the game tape here in construction, the only data set that'll actually explain the patterns that cause the most risk is the scheduled data. And that's unfortunate that we can't just watch it live, but that is a quick data set that does paint the entire picture of a project. And it is something that you can layer in one on top of the next and start to see those patterns. And then that to me is the beginning of your project controls journey. You're not going to solve all problems in one night. You're not going to solve all problems in 1 week. But if you start knocking off your biggest problems and you keep understanding that same data set to get into that next layer of problems, and if you feed that data back to your operations teams and start to put controls around that, you start to see your journey towards optimization come to fruition. And you have to make the teams accountable, and you have to get them bought in to this information. You have to bring them these nuggets that you've seen through the data to get them to listen. You can't just show up to the guy and say, hey, your electrician's going to be late again. You're going to say, hey, we looked at 100 projects. We looked at our biggest risk issues. The game plan is this on this type of project because we've looked across our data set and we want to be successful just like you want to be successful. And what did we learn from this data set? This is how the defense plays. And this is what we need to be looking out for. And this is what you need to get ahead of. And then once you get through that and get them accustomed to this new process, then you go drill deeper and you fix that next problem. And that's how you can leverage your data in construction to get to this place of optimization and competitive advantage.
Well, and you're seeing, the results of thousands of years of construction. Let's say that this is the lifespan, or call this the lifespan of a building, right? Let's call that 100 years. And the part that touches my finger is construction. Mm-hmm. So for centuries, people have put up with nonsense here, right? Because they don't have to deal with construction. It's not very often. They kind of feel it's just construction. That's just the way it is, right? But that impact today, because of cost and labor and material cost and profitability of a project and rents, all of that's been amplified. And today, the general contractors and construction crews that don't realize the impact of their poor scheduling, what you're talking about, Michael, is you have to do it, right? Without that, I think that's one of the reasons why when I look at Smart PM and the technologies, the work you guys do there, it's if you're not diving in and deep diving into an investment of, I'm going to look at where we have the breakdowns, analyze that, and now I can put systems in place to change it and have subcontractors that work with me to do the same. Because a lot of times we would put up with those bad subs because there were low prices, right? There was a lot of, by the way, that's a whole separate subject we could get off on for a minute, but the whole bid process forces us into decision logic that has subs that don't care about this stuff. We end up with subs that because of pricing are like, well, you can't really yell at that guy because that's the only drywall I could get at this price. And you kind of put up with the nonsense. Right, because of pricing.
Well, you can, but if you have a little bit of an edge through your data, you can start to make decisions early enough to overcome those obstacles before they come to fruition. Like, say, for instance, with your drywall guy that you're not paying as much because it's the only person we got. Well, maybe you got to get another drywall guy to do some accelerated work. Maybe you've got to get more resources. Maybe you got to figure out where you need to get ahead of the curve. And you might even realize if your schedule process is as broken as most of them, that the drywall guy's not even the critical path, but you think it is. And that's what you also have to understand is this truly the critical path? Am I focused in the right areas? Because I've looked at, we've looked at hundreds of thousands of schedules and 88% of them are not following best practices, which mean 88% of them are telling us the wrong float values and the wrong critical path. And how are you supposed to make decisions on that? And why do you think people are getting in arguments at the end of the job when they have a schedule telling them one thing and reality telling them another? And all of a sudden they're late and over budget and they're arguing over money and they're going to lose their profit margins on this job and the owner's going to lose their revenue and they're both fighting about that. And they're using data that was crap, right? And you look at that at all of them.
The end of a project is where everybody gets afraid. Look, because at the end, we worked our asses off. I mean, construction people work their asses off.
Absolutely.
Now, you get to the end of a project and fear kicks in because we're not going to be profitable. We're not going to turn over on time. I'm going to ruin my relationship with the owner. All of us, we're here. I'm going to fail, right? Or all the above and many, many more things that scare us, right? The problem is living there, it's too late. Right? I mean, now we got to be able to go back to the other side that says, all right, if we're going to do this, we've got to, let's your schedule. Like if you're Mr. Drywaller, if you've only, we needed 5 guys. We bid this to have 5 drywallers or 7 drywallers or 10 drywallers, whatever the number was. But we didn't vet the sub properly, and they don't have it. But now we're committed because we contracted with them or pricing, and that's the only one we could get. I think what you're saying is, now how do you take that resource and find a way through your scheduling piece, your best practices, go, all right, maybe I could start this area with the 5 guys and I can catch up to the schedule, even though they're not the people we wanted to get it done in that, you see a lot of 2 weeks for drywall, but maybe it ends up being 3 or 4 weeks, but maybe start earlier.
Yeah.
Right. And you might end later, but you look at critical path items to keep the whole project on schedule. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it on a project by project basis. The schedule data is meaningful if you are following a set of best practices and you're getting ahead of the curve through analytics. But on a business intelligence perspective, it's very useful for operations. But one thing that you said that I think is very important to note at the end of a job, all of us are scared, right?
Yeah.
What I noticed prior to starting Smart PM, what I was involved in for 15 years was being a delay consultant. I came into projects at the end to help them navigate through those difficult situations. What was most interesting to me was a lot of the times everybody at that moment believed that that problem had started recently, and they had all these excuses that they believed were the change orders or the rain or the the RFIs were everywhere, or this sub crapped the bed. But what I noticed when I went to do my analysis was these problems were happening from the beginning. You were righting the ship as you went, but you weren't understanding the breakdowns of risk that you were embedding in the plan, and you started to hope, and then you continued to course correct, and you got to a point of infeasibility, years ago.
Yeah, right. You're way back then.
Yeah. So what my job was to really run through what actually delayed the job. How did you respond? What actually delayed the job? How did you respond? And why are you calling me up now, telling me everything that went wrong in the last month? The fact of the matter is the project was unfolding and nobody was willing to admit it. Nobody was willing to analyze the data frequently enough to predict future problems and get ahead of them. And they were all so scared at the end to take on that blame that they started pointing fingers with everything they got. And both sides were doing it. And then they hired the delay consultants to come in and pick apart everybody's analysis until it went to court. And I just thought that was the most counterproductive thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I wanted to help people better understand their data in real time to be able to avoid that fallout. It doesn't have to happen at the end. When people are, a lot of times people think in the beginning of the job, these delays are okay because we got a lot of time. But what they do is they push things off, they delay things, they course correct to keep the end date, and they're not even studying things like compression. They don't even know at what point does our projects and typically get over compressed, at which point we have to make some difficult decisions to start delivering everything on time from here on out to actually get it on time. It goes into this blinders mindset. And then this outcome that you had mentioned, it always happens at the end of the job, that fire drill. But that problem started a year ago. And that's what I wanted to bring to light was we have a challenge here. It's starting now. What do we do with this information to get ahead of the future? And how do I make my business see it? Not just the site team, not their over optimism. I don't want their bias, their over optimism bias to dictate my profits as a business owner. I want to know when my projects are headed down a path. And you need to get there through your data on an isolated basis on a project, but also on a collective data basis to get those patterns to understand what increases our risk so that we can communicate on every job ahead of the problem, the game tape. And that's why I believe, that's why I left consulting. I mean, I was getting called in at the end of the day to do the same analysis, to help people argue over money and watching them, get to agreements and have analyses spinned in different directions. But the data always said the same thing. This has been going on for the whole job. Nobody talked about it. Nobody wanted to. There was no accountability. There was no visibility from above. There was no discussion about the owner's issues until it was too late. And that's waste. And I don't like waste. I'm an industrial engineer. I hate waste.
You're speaking my language, right? Getting to that place. By the way, we always call that role that you were, we call him the wolf, right? Remember Pulp Fiction, the wolf, right? Like you call on the wolf, right? And all of a sudden you got to get this guy who can come in and help get, wipe up all the blood, get everything done, get us through the scenario, right? And the goal is to not to have to call the wolf. Right. I mean, every company's got a wolf they can, call in to help save the day, but the goal is not to be there, right? Let's not end up having a bloody mess on a project. And I think what you've done is you put that data in front of everybody and go, look, this is what you're messing up on. Now let's get systems in place that stop this. We don't, as an industry, have to keep doing this. And a lot of what we're doing going forward, I think it's going to be kind of sexy and fun. I talked to some guys on a podcast the other day about doing, how Revit's going to change the world, right? How all of a sudden now we're going to get to fundamental parts and pieces, and that'll really help us do AI scheduling in the 15-minute increments. That we're getting smarter and smarter as we go. And I think that your software does that. Tell the audience a little bit about your software and how it functions and makes them see that data better.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned before, I was a consultant. I got involved in projects that were either late and over budget and needed to be argued in court, or I got involved when people were getting nervous about a project ending late and over budget and wanted me to help them understand how to get this thing done on time, or how to mitigate as much of the risk as we could. My analysis was always get me your schedule data first. I mean, that data set, like I said, that gave me a lay of the land, right? It told me, everything I needed to know about what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, what decisions were made along the way, when was risk increased due to those decisions, and when did the schedule fall apart. And that's step one, right? Like most
Yep.
people go to cost, like where did we lose money, right? What sub did crappy? All that kind of stuff is great, but I want to know the why. I want to understand what drove us into this situation. And like I said before, there's no data set that will tell you what drove you without understanding the schedule data. So with that in mind, having been through a lot of these situations and realizing that regardless of what I'm being told by the people on the site who have very biased opinions for good reason, and are also extremely hardworking, optimistic people by design, you realize that there's a lot more to the story, and nobody really is admitting that or understanding that. When you can see the forest through the trees, you start to understand that. And that's where, I wondered, why are they calling up the wolf at the end of the job if the pattern seems to be this is unfolding throughout the job? And why don't they want to pay for the wolf to be jumping in every month to take a quick look at the data and tell them what it means? And I know that project controls, companies that deploy project controls, that's what they're attempting to do, but they don't understand the time necessary to do that. So what I realized was, scheduling's broken. Schedules are poorly constructed. People are listening. Things are getting pushed off. Delays are happening. End dates are getting righted. Over confidence is starting to enter the equation through compression and acceleration. Nobody's talking about the reasons. And this is a pattern that seems to be on 80% of jobs, and they still don't want to pay for the wolf. So technology was the thing, right? Project controls around scheduling. There's a way to navigate through project controls to make sure you're putting together a good quality schedule that's worthy of managing a job. 88% of schedules are not there, which tells us that decisions that are going to be made are erroneous. So we fix that first. And then we monitor performance, right? We got this good schedule. Now we're tracking against a plan. How much did they start? How much did they finish? What delayed the job? How did they respond to those things? And are we getting put at risk? And we continue that process through technology over and over and over. And we make it visible to the executives just as much to the site teams so that they can communicate and collaborate. And the site teams can use the data to inform the subs of what needs to happen today and down the road to effectively achieve our goals. And like I mentioned before, there was no other data set out there as powerful as the schedule. The challenge is people can't digest that information in their head from a 100-page Gantt chart. And what we do is we pull it to a level that makes sense. We show them the writing on the wall. We do it at the project level, and we also do it at the operational level. So not only are we looking, is our technology platform looking at you on a site by site basis, but it's aggregating these negative patterns that tie to risk to your profit margins as well. And to me, it was worth the risk for me to leave consulting, which is a very lucrative business, to actually come up with a solution to end the waste and the stress.
That's interesting. Look, Michael, it's a pleasure. Look, all of us want to make our customers happy. I mean, ultimately, all of us want to make a profit. Period. Right? It starts there. We all want to be
And they're
profitable.
loyal people. I love
Right.
construction people. They
That's
are
right.
hardworking, loyal, and then they miss a few things, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's stressful. And that's a terrible thing for these people.
It just doesn't have to happen. And when we
Right.
know that, if all of us will take the responsibility and say, look, it's going bad because of something I'm doing. Stop blaming everybody else. Look, if it's my project, I'm ultimately responsible for what happens here. And if I can't look at the way that I'm acting, right? If I can't look at the behaviors that I am as as the leader of that project, and that I'm causing those problems, we're never going to change, right? There's no accountability without taking on radical acceptance that I'm accountable for what happens. I mean, there's books about it. I mean, if you look at Extreme Habits or any of the great stuff, look, if I don't get into getting into detail and take on the accountability for it and solving that, all right, and I think that's what you do, right? I think you put this in our face. And for those of you that are ready to take on the accountability of your projects, this is where you get a chance to do that, right? This is where I say to you, take on a software like Michael's and look at how you keep messing up your own projects.
And actually, I'm going to argue with you on that.
Go ahead.
Interestingly enough, think about the owner contractor relationship. There are designs that are incomplete. There are RFIs. There are owners saying, I need to change some things.
But aren't
And
I responsible for that? Here, if I take on, absolutely, my customer's a mess. If I take on radical responsibility, let's go down it. If I take on, the plans are terrible, the architect's a mess, the owner keeps changing his mind, right? Her mind or their mind, whatever it is, right? If I take that on and I hold myself accountable for dealing with what's going on with what the reality of it is, to your point, to the reality of it, now can I go and do something about it? Because look, I've submitted RFIs. If I don't have an answer by Tuesday, most likely your schedule is going to change. And here's the impact of that.
exactly. That's my point. Exactly.
And now I have a measurable result. I have I've now taken back the uncontrollability. I have control. I get to say, hey, your lack of decision or your lack of information is not going to be my fault. I need an answer by here so I can order by here so I can have it delivered by here. And if I don't have one of those, here's the impact to you, Mr. Owner or Mr. Architect or Mr. Team Member. It's going to cost you because I'm not eating it.
That's what should be happening in real time. And the only way that you're going to get there is with accurate information. And to be able to go back to the owner and with truth say, this one thing, like, sure, this change order is okay. It's not going to impact the critical path, but this one is very important. They don't get that level of information. So then the owner feels like they were sort of misguided when they're getting told at the end of the job that all your change orders are, this particular change order really screwed things up. That's why it's that much more important to understand the information that you have in front of you and bring it to a level to communicate with all parties, including the subs, including the architect, including the owner, including yourself. And if that process is broken, if that data is not being utilized to your advantage, and you're continuing to just try until it's too late and come up with all these reasons why it's not your fault, that's not going to save your relationship either. One thing we noticed is that when those discussions happen with the owner and there's truth and it's not broad assumptions, it's very deliberate, accurate truth, they start to understand their own impact and they are willing to make decisions with you whether or not to accelerate, whether or not to kick the end date down. What they don't like is when you say everything's fine until it's too late and now their business is all jacked up.
Getting a change order, my belief is getting a change order that's properly written, right? I mean, look, when I have a proper change order, it doesn't come over with one line item. You know, you get, here's $100,000 change order. So it just, you get this fix bad soil, right?
Yeah.
I get this $100,000, and you wonder why an owner can't make a decision because there's not enough data there. They're left. Look, what happens is when you don't have the answer, when you don't have data, remember owners, when they don't have the data, what do? They go to past experience, and they put that past experience in that spot, and they go, oh, I remember last time I had this bad soil, that guy was trying to screw me over, right? They were trying to mess with me. That sub's a bad sub. He's trying to milk me. Oh, those site guys, they're just saying bad data. But when I go back and I can show them, hey guys, here's where we were digging. Here's where we found bad soil, and here's a proctor that was on site. We actually measured it. We took it. Here's the samples. Let me show you what we found. Oh, by the way, we also took your borings, and you realize you didn't do borings here, right? I can show them the impact of the bad data they gave me, right? I can show them the impact of having someone on site that can show me exactly where the soil is, how much of it was wrong. I can do some test digging. I can bring them clear information on why that $100,000 change order is $100,000 and what is the impact of that. The more information I give them, the less they go there, the faster they can make a decision on what has to happen.
Yeah, and especially in the time aspect. If you can say, okay, so here's the process for getting to an answer so that we can move forward, right? Here's how long it's going to take to, review the information. Here's how long it's going to take to sign, get the right materials in place. Here's how long it's going to take to construct the work. And if we were to drop that into the schedule, here's what happens to your end date. And by the way, we've already mitigated some of it. We've moved some things around. We're going to start over here, and here's how we're mitigating that. If you're having those conversations, and what you're doing is you're building trust, and you're getting that owner to understand. But if you're sitting there going, well, we're going to do the best we can, and I'll let you know how it goes, and just let me know when you're ready to talk about it, and we'll see you later. That and then come back 2 years and say, remember that unforeseen site condition? Well, we lost 90 days on that because you didn't respond to something. That's the kind of stuff that starts to make you feel like, this is a game, and that's where they don't want to be.
You're right in that when you take that data, it took 90 days to get an answer. And I go back and go, all right, what do I need to do to make that 90 days be 9 minutes? Right? What is it? What is it I have to do? I did an interview the other day with a Brazilian lawyer who took divorces from 12 months to 12 hours. Wow. And I said, well, how the hell did you do that? Well, what they did was they realized that there was, 2 or 3 places in a divorce in Brazil that a lawyer had to sign off, right? There was a kind of an agreement. And so they took these 2 or 3 places that had to have a lawyer stamp on it, review and stamp, and make sure it met the law, right? And what they figured out was they created an app where they could literally go, hey, you're going to get divorced. Both of you sign up on the app. It takes you through some steps to get there. And then it goes out to, it went out to a lawyer on the free market, kind of like Uber, right? Kind of went out to a lawyer. So now the lawyers, maybe it's a mother who's dropped off her kids and she wants to pick up a couple hours, or a dad who's unemployed and wants to, pick up some side work, or maybe even a business owner who's saying, hey, I'm slow, and they could pick up a couple hours of lawyering and do a review. And then they can pop that back, send it back to the person, right? So when we start to think about solutions to, it doesn't have to be 12 months, right? It doesn't have to be 90 days to get that answer. When I go look at that, what I believe you're doing is you're taking it and showing them, here's where the breakdown's happening. Let's stop doing that.
Right. And that's a very good example of somebody who had to look at mass data to understand the 3 breakdowns, right? To get it to 12 hours from 12 months. And that's, to me, similar. If you get all your scheduled data, you're going to see a lot of breakdowns. That's for damn sure. But then you can make some decisions on how do we start to operate understanding these patternistic breakdowns to start to get to that 12, hours, right? I know no project's going to get done in 12 hours.
But we're there. If you're willing to look at I think the next piece that's missing that I want to speak to, I think, with you is that you got to be willing to look at how could I be at fault? Right. I think that when we look at it and go, all right, maybe just how could I be at fault? If the opposite of what I'm saying is true, right? It's not that guy, the owner, the architect, the city, the inspector. Hey, the inspector didn't show up. Great. Did you communicate with him? Did you reach out to him? Does your sub know him? Do you have a sub that knows that city properly? Right. I mean, there's 100. If I take on 100% accountability for the things that go wrong on my job site. Not that I can fix them overnight. I think you're right. There's no way I can fix them, but at least now I'm heading down the path of ownership of it. And with that, now I have agency. I'm not victim to the schedule or the problem. I now have agency. And I think that's what your data does. It gives a construction company, an owner, the data they need to have agency in solving the problems that that are happening in their business.
Yeah, and I look at it a different way. Continuous improvement, right? We all have areas where we can improve. And yeah, maybe it was a lot of RFIs. Maybe that's all on the owner. But maybe this is happening on all your projects and you don't like having that situation where all the RFIs mount up and you end up delivering late. You lose out on opportunity when that happens too. So understanding that there are issues in our business that patternistically cause challenges to our projects, and then coming up with constructive solutions to overcome those challenges, that's how you get to a culture of continuous improvement. And if you're not doing that, you're generally saying to yourself, well, we can improve, or we don't want to improve, or we don't want to change. But data is the only way that you can get buy-in for continuous improvement. And that's in my experience. And we have that in my own business because I'm very data focused in anything I do. I don't have a conversation without looking at our data. I don't go accuse some sales guy for being a shitty salesperson, for not selling, sorry for swearing, for not selling, software. I look at our mass data and I look at our system. I look at our process. I figure out what breakdowns in our process are resulting in our trajectory today. And how do I screw in this thing and screw in that thing to increase our trajectory or increase our revenue or increase our profit? That's where you get to a point where you don't have to keep throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks. You really get focused in on the things that drive the needle. And if you get in the pattern of doing that, that's where you get to optimization.
Well, Michael Pink, I am grateful for your wisdom, the work that you do, making our business smarter. Folks, I'll have all the links to Michael down below. Michael, do you want to, where can people catch up with you? And if they want to bring Smart PM technologies to their company, where can they do that?
Well, you can obviously go to our website. That's www.smartpm.com. Check out the site. If you want to learn about the product, all you got to do is request a demo and somebody will be in contact with you. If you want to connect with me directly, I'm on LinkedIn, Michael Pink, CEO of Smart PM. I would love to be connected. We've got all sorts of educational material that we share about broader project controls. So, by all means, follow our company on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, grateful for that. Grateful for this great conversation. Get us really thinking about how we can take accountability through data, how harnessing data and technology to transform the construction business is what we all need to be doing. We know that. Everybody that's listening today knows that. So grateful for you and the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I really appreciate what you're doing as well. Getting the word out there, getting good ideas out there, getting people focused on ways to improve. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, audience members, thanks for being here today. Look, last week, another record-breaking week. We had 64,000 subscribers on YouTube last week. It's unbelievable. 64.5 It's unbelievable the numbers we're breaking through, and you listeners make all the difference. But I noticed that there was a bunch of you that made it through the end of a podcast that weren't subscribers. If you guys could take a second right now, just take a second and like and subscribe. Just do that right now. It means a world of difference to Joe and Alyssa and all the people in the background that put this podcast together. They work tirelessly to find great guests like Michael, to bring great ideas to the surface. If you could take a second and do that now, I would be grateful. And as always, thanks for listening.